all those warm bodies populating the night unafraid, rediscovered the peaceful uprising, the democratic insurgency that would later have the world admiring. The noise barrage laid bare Marcos's stuffing of the ballot box. When the dictatorship announced that Aquino had been defeated at the polls, election fraud was there for all to see.
I thought the end is there for Marcos. I think I was thinking that whether they cheated us or not, we already had won the elections.
The first incident that solidified the opposition was that Laban campaign of 1978. When we lost, then that incident that could have been a catalyst also fizzled out.
Aquino paid tribute to a cellmate. In the eerie silence of my tomb, a little mouse appears, nervous, afraid, retreats to a corner, watches me eat and pray, returning every night to keep me company. He shares my meager food, plays to amuse me, helping me waste the precious, priceless hours. How strange. I found friendship with a rodent I could not find among my captors, my countrymen.
Aquilino Pimentel had run with Laban in Manila, then co-founded the Filipino Democratic Party, the PDP in the South. The PDP was, again, leftist, but non-communist, non-violent, and determined to develop a grassroots political culture to sustain real democratic government.
In the Philippines, political parties usually revolved around a strong man, a wealthy man, you know, around the personality of the founder rather than around ideas. But when we founded PDP Laban, we used to require them at least a 5-day seminar.
One seminar would be in Ilocos. We would have it under a mango tree. We would have around 20 to 40 participants. And I remember once when we had it, and then two tanks came, pointed the cannons at us. And so we didn't know if we should continue, but then I did, because I was the one facilitating. I said, let's continue. So we just continued, and then the tanks went away.
Although in and out of jail, Pimentel was elected mayor of the second largest city in Mindanao, Cagayan de Oro. A further indication that despite his repressions, Marcos was losing control.
Underground networks organized themselves as urban guerrillas, striking high-profile properties of Marcos and his cronies in Manila.
The Light of Fire movement and the April 6th movement set out to destroy the impression that Marcos had everything under control, to destabilize his dictatorship, and to awaken the passive majority.
I said, we have come to the point where we just have to make up our mind on what there is to be done, what is there for us to do. We need a realistic strategy to bring the regime down. This combination of massive non-violence with incisive use of force.
What I call myself is a hardcore nationalist, and at that time I was willing to do anything to get Marcos out of there. Someone had come to my residence, someone I had known from my activist years in the 70s, early 70s, and he asked me to, if I could plant a bomb at the convention where Marcos was speaking, and I was very hesitant at first. because I knew that it was a gem of an opportunity for propaganda, and we did want to bring the dictatorship to its knees. And I did realize too that this was a prime occasion for getting world attention, to what Marcos was doing here. I just said, just make it a small bomb.
The United States was enmeshed in a contradiction so extreme that it went all but unmentioned. The United States government was propping up Marcos with military and monetary aid, while the cities of the U.S. harbored and sometimes nurtured the opposition to Marcos among Filipino Americans and Filipino exiles. A prominent liberal, Raul Manglapes, had been traveling when martial law was declared. He became president of a new organization in the U.S., the Movement for a Free Philippines. Sonny Alvarez had gone underground in Manila the day martial law was declared.
So I jumped out of bed and started to look for refuge. I'd work around in disguise and I moved around, and sometimes I find myself in one community, deliver a fast speech, then go. And then one time President Macapagal, who had become the president of the Constitutional Convention, he said that there's need to have an organized opposition overseas. So he turned to me and said, about you, Sonny. He called me Sonny. You're a bachelor, you're young. So I said, yes, why not? I would.
A Greek-American businessman, Steve Xenakis, and his aristocratic Filipino wife, Presi Lopez Xenakis, settled in San Francisco. Marcos had taken Presi's brother hostage and then plundered the Lopez family's enormous assets. They devoted themselves without reservation to bringing down Marcos.
And the decision to devote all my time to try to help the people of the Philippines to get him out, I felt that you have to fight for what's right, not for what are the percentages of success. It's easy to decide on what you do every day. You don't say first, let me see if this will affect my family or will hurt my children or will take my property. You do it because you have to do it. And then the odds change because you don't calculate the odds.
Opponents of Marcos within the U.S. were spied upon, threatened, and sometimes terrorized.
I read in the papers that my brother was killed. I was warned first. I was warned. They gouged his eyes, they bashed his head, they cut his tongue, and broke his teeth. He was so mangled. It was really, I think, deliberately intended to drive home a message that if you oppose the regime, there could be these terrible consequences. They call the system selective terror.
Marcos was a very, very brilliant man. He knew he could not follow 1,000 people all over the United States to see what they're doing, but he would do selectively. He would do something which would be deliberately disclosed, so everybody would be terrified. Everybody thought that Marcos had 3 agents following every person here.
Although President Carter tried to put a new priority to human rights, his administration wavered in the face of pressure to negotiate with Marcos. At stake was the continued use of American military bases in the Philippines, Clark Air Force Base and Subic Bay Submarine Base, the 2 largest overseas military bases in the world. In this complex swirl of pressure and counter-pressure, Marcos thought it imprudent to execute Aquino, but also feared letting him loose. Aquino suffered a heart attack. When he refused to be treated by Marcos's doctors, he was hurriedly removed from prison and put on a flight to the United States.
It was 1980. When Ninoy came here, Marcos let him leave the country for an emergency heart bypass operation. And they're all very happy. Ninoy's out of prison. They're a family again. The kids are going to school. He taught some classes and he did research. And his research was basically trying to restore democracies in countries around the world through peaceful means.
Aquino became a fellow at Harvard Center for International Studies. He spoke on 50 college campuses, addressed the Council on Foreign Relations, and testified before the United States Congress. Through Harvard, he and Cory formed a personal friendship with South Korea's Kim Dae-jung, who, like Aquino, had been driven into exile by authoritarian government.
From the moment when we met, we felt that we are the comrades to fight for the democratization of our countries against dictatorships. We felt we were sharing the same destinies, so we were doomed to collaborate each other for the democratization.
Aquino communicated incessantly with followers and colleagues in the Philippines and within the United States.
In the name of the members of the Movement for a Free Philippines and all other freedom fighters, I welcome you. Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes the life of a nation is inextricably linked with the life of a person. The destiny of the nation and the fate of the person, by some chance of fate, become one.
I received a most poignant letter from a mother and a wife, and I'd like to read it to you. My dear Senator Aquino,
I'm very worried about my husband and wish to see him immediately. It has been 2 months since his arrest, and still I have not spoken to him. Our son keeps on asking me when he shall see his tatay. He asks me questions like, bakit nakakulong si tatay? And why don't we go and set tatay free?
I am writing you now because I have just received word from my husband that he intends to go on a hunger strike starting Wednesday, February 4. I understand that a number of other detainees accused of their involvement with the April 6 movement will also go on a hunger strike beginning February 4. Please pray for them. Thank you in advance for any help you can give me.
Please, sir, help me see my husband at the soonest time possible. And may the Lord continue blessing you with compassion and courage. Sincerely, Cristina Montiel.
How many Montiels are there? How many unsung, unnamed Filipinos are still languishing in the jails of our land? In that blighted land of ours, where our founding fathers gave up their lives, that we may see the morning sun.
The most important division within the anti-Marcos forces was between the philosophies of violence and non-violence.
But there's the notion that things can be accomplished by violence. Trying to shake that notion is really hard. Nonviolent action is a lot less easy to transmit in terms of its amazing power.
People whose name I cannot now tell you because their lives are in danger. They told me, Mr. Senator, they said, we have waited 8 years for you. Lead us. We are now ready. Maybe we are a handful, but we are now ready to lay down our lives, and these are young Filipino boys and girls. I told them, if you go into the road of violence, it will only lead to more violence, I said. And what will happen when 10,000 boys and girls are already dead in the streets of Manila and blood will be flowing in our very streets? I cannot, I said, resist the wailing of mothers who will now blame me that their children have died in the altar of freedom.